Welcome, everybody, to Real Estate Strategies. Today, we're going to be discussing Bitcoin with Mark Moss and, of course, real estate. Before we get started, I get a lot of questions from people asking how I created wealth and how it all started with budgeting the money correctly. So I created a financial stress test for you. You can start by looking at your financials today. Just go to kenmcelroy.com/stress test to check it out. So, Mark, welcome. Welcome to the channel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ken. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know who Mark Moss is, you got to jump over his channel. He's got hundreds of thousands of people watching. He releases great videos. He's really talks a lot about currency and Bitcoin and crypto, and we were just talking before this. He's going to a bunch of conferences. As you guys know, the economy's starting to open up and a bunch of that. Now, I know you've been a proponent of Bitcoin, and you quoted Janet Yellen, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, said that the access to digital currency will help lower income people open bank accounts. And I'm curious, how do you think Bitcoin will increase the access to banking?
Well, Bitcoin will increase it. What Janet Yellen is proposing won't. So let me break that down for you. So in order to join the financial system, you have to have permission, right? You have to go to the bank account and they ask for lots of documentation. If it's a corporation or whatever, you have to show proof of address and ID and all these things. So you have to have permission in order to join that. And because of that permission that's required to join the financial system today in the world, per the UN, we have 2 billion adults in the world that have no access to the financial system. It's a staggering number. Now, how can they get ahead if they can't even access the financial system? Of course, the answer is they can't. And so it's because it's permissioned. You know that I've recently moved to Puerto Rico. It took me 26 days to get a bank account open there. I'm a known person. I'm a high value client with my bank. I have 25 years of banking history, and it took 26 days to get permission to join that. So Bitcoin is what we call permissionless. And so what that means is anybody right now can grab their phone, download a wallet, and I can send you money. That's it. There's no permission that's required. And so because of that, anybody in any part of the world, as long as they have access to even the most basic smartphone, could join the Bitcoin network without permission and enter the financial world.
Yeah, which is great because that's actually what people want, right? They want to just be able to have access, however it might be. I remember going back to Asia. I was back there with Kiyosaki, and they were using their smartphones just boop bloop, as they were checking out. Like it was just all kind of done through these digital wallets already. It's been going on. This is a little bit different here, but I think that the fact that they don't, the old banks are archaic, man. Like they're dinosaurs.
I mean, ease of payments for sure is cool, like you're talking about being able to use your smartphone. But I just think it's really about democratizing, decentralizing finance. And so, I mean, I know you're a big investor. You wire, I'm sure, big chunks of money around the world. And I'm sure you've had problems like me when I go into wire money. Why are you sending it? Do you know who you're sending it to? What do you need to do that for? Then they have to go get approval. And recently, I was sending 6 figures up to Canada on this mining deal that I'm in. I sent my wife to the bank. It took her an hour. They had to call this manager and that manager. She had to leave before she could even get the money out, had to go back a second time. And that's to send my own money. I have to have permission. And so I think it's, in today's day, information age, it's pretty easy to see how that is a messed up system. As you just said, it's archaic. And so that's really the thing. The thing back to just the original quote you said with Janet Yellen is they're talking about these central bank digital currencies. And so they basically want to turn the dollar into a form of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. But to her quote, it's not going to fix anything because it's still going to be just as permissioned as it is today. It's their regulations that cause the problem.
Yeah, 100%. So do you see Bitcoin as something anyone should invest in, or is it for some specific type of investor? Should people break it up and allocate it? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I absolutely do think it's for every single person. Obviously past performance, no guarantee of the future, of the history, but if you would have just bought Bitcoin and that's it, you would have outperformed every single hedge fund, every single institutional investor, the smartest investors, smartest hedge funds in the entire world. You would have outperformed everyone. So you don't have to be that smart. You could have just bought it and held it, and you would have outperformed everybody. And that's That's this year. That's year to date this year. That's any time period you want to choose. Now, obviously, you could say, well, during these 6 months, it wasn't. But year to date, it's been the best performing asset. So I definitely think it should be part of everybody's strategy. And as a matter of fact, now all the big banks are starting to say that. Just today, Goldman Sachs, probably the leader in the financial space, came out and said now they're advising their high net worth clients to buy it. But guess what? News alert. You don't have to be a high net worth client to buy it. Anybody can buy it. So right now they're telling their high net worth, right? Get their good buddies in first. But you and I, everybody has the opportunity to get in right now today.
So Mark, so you referenced that a lot of financial institutions like Morgan Stanley and Cash App have been buying up Bitcoin. And are they anticipating a wave of customers using crypto, or are the big fish just buying first and figuring out how to actually use it?
Well, we're seeing both, right? So what's interesting about Bitcoin is it's the people's money. And so the government, the Fed, they can have whatever they want, but we can also have what we want. And so this is the first time in history that the people have gotten into Bitcoin first, before venture capitalists, before banks. So they're all coming in after the fact. Now, there's a few different things going on. So you mentioned like PayPal. So they're buying it so they can resell it, right? So they're buying it, as to your point, in preparing for the people that want to come buy it for them. But then you have, Morgan Stanley, other financial institutions that might be buying it for their own balance sheet. So we're seeing this big trend where S&P 500 publicly traded companies are using it for their treasury.
Yeah,
so
they're afraid of cash, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, hey, I don't want all my money sitting in US dollars because they're losing 15, 20% of their purchasing power per year. So I'm going to move a big chunk of it over into Bitcoin. We saw Tesla do 1.5 billion of it. MicroStrategy's been the big proponent of $1 billion and whatnot. So they're buying for different reasons. Some because of the financial services are demanding it, to your point. Some of it are they're moving their treasury funds over because, as Michael Saylor says, like their funds in the treasury are like a melting ice cube, and they don't like their funds disappearing like an ice cube.
Yeah. So I think everybody might have missed that little nuance that Mark said. Like big companies are now considering Bitcoin because they're afraid of cash. That's actually the point, right? And so, when massive big companies like Elon Musk is now, you can buy a Tesla with Bitcoin. When you start to see stuff like this, you really should be taking notice, because basically they're saying that they don't trust the dollar, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, Ken, obviously your brand is in real estate. I mean, I'm a real estate investor as well. And the goal has always been to try to beat the deflation or the inflation of the dollar. And so I think if people can start to look at things differently, and the way that you need to look at things is like, what's the purchasing power of my dollar? How much does my dollar buy? So if I had $100,000 in the bank 10 years ago, and I still have $100,000 in the bank, the difference is that 100,000 buys way less today than it did 10 years ago. Right. So it's purchasing power. So I might decide not to hold cash. I might put it into real estate. Well, now that $100,000 property is now worth $250,000, $300,000. So it kept up with my purchasing power. The same with Bitcoin. I might have one Bitcoin in my account 5 years ago. I still have one Bitcoin, but the difference is that it buys way more today than it would have. And so I think if people could just kind of switch their thinking to like maintaining purchasing power, which is why you want to go into real estate, why you'd want to hold stocks, or why you'd want to hold Bitcoin, we just need to maintain that. And dollars are designed to lose purchasing power. So the Fed targets a 2% inflation. It's probably more about 15%, depending on what your shopping habits are. But let's just say at 2%, that means over a 10-year period, you've lost 20% of your purchasing power by design. That's their goal.
I know, that's insane. People just need to know that. Like, that's why Kiyosaki says savers are losers. He's not really saying that you personally are. What he's saying is that you're losing purchasing power of the money that you actually have in the bank. So one of the things, Mark, that's been kind of interesting to watch is obviously this run. It's been incredible. But there's some videos popping up on YouTube about, taking Bitcoin, investing in real estate. And I mean, when you and I talked, we're like, that would be a fun video,
Yep.
So I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, what do you mean? Well, like I said, well, like if I go to Vegas and I put some money up and all of a sudden, I'm up, 50, 100 grand or whatever, I take whatever I pull off of the table and started with, it's just stick it in my pocket. Now I've got house money. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
It's sort of like that, but I think it goes a little bit deeper. I mean, there's a little bit more strategy there. And I like to say that methods are few, principles are few, methods are many. So we can talk about the principle, and there's a bunch of ways you can slice and dice this. I've done a couple of videos on my channel, and I call it the velocity of money. So when you typically hear the velocity of money, the Fed is using that to measure how fast a dollar moves through the economy. So Ken, if I gave you, here's $20 for lunch, and then you go spend that $20 at the tire shop to get your tire fixed. That guy takes that $20 and goes to the auto parts store to get more parts supplies. That guy goes and pays his rent. That same $20 moved through the economy 5 times, right? So we also want to think about how many times we can get our own dollar moving through our own investments. Can I spend the same dollar 5 times or 10 times? And so you can do this with real estate as a perfect way to do this. People use whole life insurance policies, but you can also do it with Bitcoin. So for example, a perfect analogy would be, this is a true story. In December, I sold one of my apartment complexes. I didn't identify what properties I wanted to go into yet. So I put the money into Bitcoin. Since then, it's doubled. So I've doubled the money. I can now take a loan against that asset at say 50% LTV for like 1 or 2%. And I could go buy the same amount of real estate. And now I have the Bitcoin and I have the real estate with the same dollar. And so it's no different than Kiyosaki's strategy, which he shared with me, we were talking about. But you take a trophy asset, and this is how the rich get rich. They take trophy assets and they never sell them. They leverage those assets to live off the debt. It's not it's not taxable, and then reinvest it.
Yeah. And so what we're trying to talk about, guys, here is really diversification. You know, Bitcoin is speculative, and obviously we've had a very, very good run. Real estate is tangible. It's physical. It's something that, sits there. It's something that you can control much easier. You stick a renter in there if you buy well, and it can cash flow, and you get tax benefits as well. Whereas on the Bitcoin side, they're starting to come after you on the capital gain side, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I think, the strategy is, how do you use both of those, right? So how could I, like I just said, how could I use the Bitcoin to leverage to buy more real estate? Because as your point is, right? Yes, real estate provides cash flow and Bitcoin doesn't really do that. And so I like to invest for cash flow. That's like my number one goal, which is why I've been investing in real estate for 25 years. That we need cash flow to live. But I think it's about building that strategy where you can take that dollar out of the real estate asset to go buy more real estate assets, or take the dollar out of a Bitcoin asset and go buy more real estate assets, or back and forth. And that's really how you get that. But I think ultimately it just kind of comes back to owning that trophy asset for life, leveraging it with debt to continue to scale that up. And I guess you have to believe that Bitcoin is an investment for life. And so that maybe that's a different conversation, one that I'm very passionate about. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you a question. I remember, I had Anthem Blanchard on the channel, and, his dad, James Blanchard, sat in front of, the Congress, and basically, when they outlawed gold. And so the government back in the 70s obviously did outlaw gold. And, back in the, let's see, I think Roosevelt 34, that's what it was. Yep. And then, do you think that they're going to come after Bitcoin and outlaw Bitcoin? And what do you think is going to happen around that?
So I just recorded a video. It hasn't gone live on my channel yet, but I made a video for that exact topic because Ray Dalio just came out and said that he believes that the government will outlaw Bitcoin because they outlawed gold, because they don't want a competing form of money. And I went on the video and I said, Ray Dalio's understanding of history is wrong. Unfortunately, I love Ray Dalio. I respect him. I read his books, but his understanding of history is wrong. So what happened is, in 1913, they created the Federal Reserve and the IRS. And then we had to start using fake fiat currency, and we had to start paying taxes. That was in 1913. The banks were supposed to hold 40% of their reserves in gold. By 1933, guess what happened? They printed way too much money and they didn't have the reserves, and the government was bankrupt, and the government needed a bailout. All the creditors demanded gold. So the government had to bail themselves out and steal the people's gold to pay back to the creditors.
Yep. Yeah. So,
and the reason why it's different today is that there's no creditors are demanding gold today. No creditors are demanding Bitcoin. So they'd have no reason to go seize that, right? They just print more dollars to give to the creditors. So that's number one. So his understanding, it wasn't about competition. It was about them bailing themselves out. The other thing that I would say is that, a bunch of points here. You know all too well, Ken, how fragile the economy and the markets are today. The government, the Fed, is fighting deflation with all they have. They're pumping trillions to keep the housing market and the stock markets up, because that's a percentage of GDP. If the stock market, real estate markets drop, we go to 250, 300% GDP. Debt to GDP. We can't have that. So what would happen if they made Bitcoin illegal? They'd suck $1 trillion out of the economy. How can they afford to do that?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
There's no way they would, because they can't suck $1 trillion out of the economy right now. There's just no way. On top of that, the head of the SEC has been teaching Bitcoin at MIT for a long time. I think there's 17 senators and congressmen that are pro Bitcoin. The city of Miami, I think it's the second largest city in the United States, just made it where now you can pay your fees and taxes to the city in Bitcoin, and they're paying their employees in Bitcoin. They're putting their treasury in Bitcoin. So they're going to make it illegal, and the second largest city in the US loses all their money. Like, I just don't see that happening anymore. In addition, if we want to go even deeper, the Supreme Court ruled on encryption and ruled it falls under the First Amendment of free speech because it's code. And so Bitcoin is just computer code. And so they've already ruled that it's protecting the First Amendment. So it'd be a massive uphill battle. They'd be killing the economy. I just don't ever see that happening.
Some good points. And the most important thing is it's not physical like gold was, right?
Well, that's even a better point. So the reason why they were able to seize gold back in 1934 is because gold was already in the banks.
Yes.
The bank, they had already centralized the gold. So what they did is they actually shut the banks down. I think it was 12 days. So nobody could go withdraw their gold. And then they took it. If they had to go door to door to door to try to seize it, it would have been a whole different story, especially back then people had guns, right? So it would have been a different story. And today it's digital. You can't steal my Bitcoin. You can't seize it. So it would ruin the country, ruin the economy. It would kill cities. It would be impossible to do. I even made the chart. Interesting enough, the war on drugs started in 1971. The DEA was formed. Since 71, we every year spend more money fighting the war on drugs, but drugs just continue to grow. They haven't put a single dent in drugs, and drugs have to be grown and cultivated and processed and shipped and packed and smuggled. Bitcoin's digital. So it's just a losing battle. It's too much entrenchment. Politicians aren't going to go for it. So anything is possible, but the probability is so small, I don't worry about it.
I would totally agree. Those are the same kind of things I've been reading. So next, I'm going to chat with Mark about the percentage of Bitcoin that he recommends that you should have in your portfolio. You can sign up for this and other exclusive interview questions at kenmcelroy.com/premium. As always, man, you guys don't forget to run over to Mark's channel at Mark Moss on YouTube. Check him out. He's got a lot more videos. Obviously, great ones coming out every single week. So, Mark, again, thank you so much for your time, and can't wait to chat with you after you go to those conferences that you're going to.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ken. Always a pleasure talking to you.
100%.